All right. Good afternoon. It is Monday. I know that because I think that's the only day of the week I know at this point. It's Monday. I think last week I got all the days wrong. It was Tuesday and I said, welcome Thursday. Anyway, if you're just joining us, we're here for Managing Hoarding Disorder in the Time of COVID, Volume 2, or in Spanish, Dos. My name is Ethan. Go ahead and grab a seat, say hello. We'll always get started in a couple minutes, let people kind of get in here. We have a great panel for you, as we did last week. You might recognize some faces, but definitely say hi and let us know where you are and where you're from. We'll get started in just over a minute, I think. This is that time in the stream where we all pretend to be busy, so I'll look away. Doing really important work.
Shuffling papers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, we have just about a minute left before we get started. If you're just joining us, welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Monday afternoon, 1 p.m. on the East Coast, 10 a.m. on the West Coast. Thank you, Robin, for getting up early.
Wasn't too bad.
Yeah. So if you're just joining us, please, please, please let us know you're here. Say hello. Give us a shout out, or give yourself a shout out. I'll shout you out. And let us know where you're saying hello from. And we'll get started in just about 30 seconds. There's some fresh sushi on the bar. Feel free to help yourself. Diane is here for Schenectady. Hello, Diane. It's good to see you again. And you're very welcome. We are glad to be here for you. And for ourselves, because this is just as helpful for all of us. We're all going through this stuff together. All right, 2 minutes. I will reward those that are on time. Hi, Celine from Maryland. Great to keep them coming. We will get to Q&As as well. So have your questions locked and loaded and ready, and we will get to them as soon as we get through some initial business. So welcome, welcome, welcome. I don't know why I'm clapping like a seal, but welcome to Managing Hoarding Disorder in the Time of COVID, Volume 2. My name is Ethan Smith. I'm the National Ambassador for the International OCD Foundation, which simply means I have OCD and represent the foundation in all things advocacy and media. So I'd like to talk about it a lot. Hello, Antonella from France, Amy from Michigan. Jesse's on board. And Jessica is in Massachusetts and a good friend of mine. Anyway, so let's do some quick housekeeping before we dive in with these wonderful panelists. So as always, this town hall is intended to serve as educational content and is not intended to replace therapy. For treatment-related questions, please be sure to work with your local provider or contact a local clinician. The International OCD Foundation is not a crisis hotline and should not be used if you are in distress or feel unsafe. If you are in a crisis or you're ever feeling suicidal or unsafe, please go to your local emergency room, call 911, or call the Suicide Prevention Hotline at 800-273-8255. And Jess, I think we have that overlay somewhere in the graphics with the suicide hotline number. As always, also, we encourage you to be respectful, be kind. This is yes, there we go. There's the number and information below. Thank you so much, Jessica. But as always, we ask you to be respectful and kind. This is a public forum. This is being recorded. We try to create as safe a space as possible, but it's still online, so we do the best that we can. With that, we're excited to get started and introduce our motley crew of OCD and hoarding disorder experts. So why don't we get started? Let's start with, let's see, Dr. Randy, who is he's here, there. It's all over. He's there. Yeah, you can drop the graphic, Jeff. Thank you so much. So Dr. Randy Frost is there, and Elise Cipolla Israel, professor of psychology at Smith, and compulsive hoarding and acquiring therapist guide and client workbook. His book, Stuff, Compulsive Hoarding and the Meaning of Things, was a New York Times bestseller, a finalist for the 2010 Books for a Better Life Award, and named a must-read book for 2011 by Massachusetts Book Awards. He is also the author of the Oxford Handbook of Hoarding and Acquiring. He has been funded by the International OCD Foundation and NIMH. In 2012, he was awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award by the Mental Health Association of San Francisco, and in 2013, a Career Achievement Award from the International. My pleasure. Next, we have Lee Shuer and Becca Belofsky. We'll start with, always ladies, she studied psychology at Smith College. Oh, connections, okay. And her interests lie in emotional development and social connectedness throughout the lifespan. As an outspoken peer advocate, Beck is candid about her own experiences with depression and suicidal ideation, OCD, over shopping, and grief. In addition to her work with MSC, Beck provides relationship-based therapy to children on the autism spectrum and coaching for family members. She also facilitates wellness groups and the Buried in Treasures workshop, and is also a certified older adult peer specialist. So thank you, Beck, for being here.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
And next to Beck, we have Lee Shuer. Lee Shuer is also a certified peer specialist and co-founder of Mutual Support Consulting, LLC. Together, they make all of the founders of Mutual Support Counseling. He uses his lived experience with clutter and mental health stigma to mentor, educate, and advocate for people in recovery and those who support them. Shuer authored the Buried in Treasures Workshop Facilitator's Guide, or BIT, with Randy O'Frost. He developed WRAP, W-R-A-P, for reducing clutter with Dr. Mary Ellen Copeland. Media appearances include CBS Sunday Morning, The New York Times, and Scientific American. He's delivered over 100 keynotes and trained across the U.S. and Australia since 2008. He is a musician, artist, writer, and Atari fanboy. I didn't read that before, but that's awesome. So am I. He lives in Western Mass with his partner, Becca. And there are 3 fluffy cats. You can learn more about them. We actually have their link up at the top of the thread, www.mutualsupport.com. And last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Robin Zasio. Robin. I was looking at Zasio. Words are hard Monday morning. Dr. Robin Zasio. She's LTSW and is the owner and executive director of the Anxiety Treatment Center of Sacramento and Roseville, California, Center for Depression and Treatment-Resistant Symptoms, the Compulsive Hoarding Center, and the Cognitive Behavioral Therapy Center. Dr. Robin hosts Mental Health Matters on iHeartRadio and the Dr. Robin Zasio Show on AM 1380. She's the author of The Hoarder in You, How to Live a Happier, Healthier, Uncluttered Life. She's one of the featured doctor on Hoarders, the Emmy-nominated A&E hit series, and the host of My Extreme Animal Phobia on Animal Planet and Discovery Channel. Not last, but certainly not least, she's on the Scientific Advisory Board, the Clinical Advisory Board, the Speakers Bureau, the BTTI faculty, and the CPC committee member for the International OCD Foundation. She's also the president of the OCD Sacramento Foundation, Inc. We will also put her links in the comment thread, anxietystreatmentexperts.com and compulsivehoardingexperts.com. Okay, so thank you, Randy, Lee, Beck, and Robin for joining us. If you're just joining us as well, we're about to dive into some intros and conversations. We're getting lots of comments, so hello from everybody. Hello, Jelly Bean, my dear friend on YouTube, who's one day I'll learn the real my favorite jelly bean flavor is watermelon. We know that. Anyway, Randy, let's get started with you. How have you been since the last town hall? What are some things that you're hearing about and experiencing in your own practice and in your personal life as well?
Well, it's been an unusual time. I think an unusual time for all of us, and just reflecting on what it's been like and what it's like for people who struggle with hoarding-related issues. That all of us are in a period of uncertainty. Our normal routines are interrupted. We're having to develop new routines, new habits, new ways of being in our own homes. And I think that is one of the struggles I think all of us face, even those of us who don't struggle with hoarding problems. We have to come to a different way of being in our home and being comfortable in our home. So I think that's an important piece. And I think they're thinking about this particular time and the influence it has on especially hoarding related issues. Is there are a couple of stress points I think that might be worth thinking about as we try to talk about this, and one of them is the amount of time we're spending in our homes, and especially for those people who cope with being in a cluttered space or a crowded space by escaping their home. For them especially, this will be a stressful time if you're forced to be inside like that. Secondly, it's a stressful time for people who live with someone with a hoarding problem because they are also more confined to their home. And what is that like for them? What kinds of stresses do they experience? And how does that translate in the relationship between people living together in the home? Other kinds of stressors, I think, for people who struggle with hoarding have to do with the inability to acquire new things. For many people who struggle with this, acquiring things is a source of joy, and talk about this as their only source of joy. And so, if that's gone, how is that replaced, and what effect does that have on one's mood? So there are I think a lot of pressure points in this time that are worth thinking about and talking about it and trying to figure out ways of dealing with.
Thank you, Randy. I appreciate that. This is great. I'm so bummed I missed the first one. I mean, I have to be honest with everyone. While OCD is my sort of wheelhouse, I probably know the least amount about hoarding disorder and related things to hoarding. So I will do the best I can to navigate this, but I'm also interested to learn as much as possible. And hopefully I will ask some questions from me that will hopefully resonate with those of you that are maybe new to this topic or subject, or questioning whether you have hoarding disorder or clutter, things like that. So I look forward to engaging everyone in conversation. But next we have Lee and Beck. Lee and Beck, how are you guys doing? What are you seeing in your own lives? What are you seeing in your clients' lives? Fill us in a bit on how things are going with you.
How about you?
How about me? I'm really feeling for people who are stuck in cluttered environments. We took a lot of years to work through it ourselves, and I'm really grateful. We got to a point where we are comfortable today, but it was not an easy process to do. And I really am happy that we get to share with people that it can be done, because there aren't that many models of success out there. And so even if people are really struggling right now, I want you to know that the future can be brighter. I think it's really important to know that there's hope out there, and don't give up on that. But it's hard being stuck in the house for everyone. And I think that for family members who are going through this, who are in a home filled with their loved ones' belongings, I'm really hoping that you can find a way to get a little space within that environment for yourself, that you can bring a little calm and energy into what you need to during this hard time that we're all working on.
Lee.
Yeah, so I got to say, this has been a really transformative time for me as someone who clutters with excessive finding and keeping. This has given me a lot of opportunity to reflect on my connection to things, also my relationship to other people, and to the much bigger picture. And so, I saw a comment earlier in the chat box that someone was saying they're really hoping to let things go. And then this happened, and then they started to feel like they couldn't let anything go. And I was talking last week about how a lot of people have said that their parents or their grandparents lived through the Great Depression. And so they can, maybe that was the reason they held on to so many things, just in case they couldn't get them again. And I started to feel that when I started to, purchase things in case I couldn't get out to the stores or something like that. I started to have an experience like that. And at first, I did start to hold on to more things. I kept packaging just in case I could visit and things like that. And it was probably a couple of weeks before I started to relax, look at what I have, and then realize that even though I've probably let 70% of the things I don't need go, that I still have, 30%. And so this has been a time when the acquisition of excess things, even like notes from meetings that I would have gone to and people gave me photocopies, those aren't coming in. So I'm kind of in this sort of time capsule where everything came to this point in my life, and now I'm making a grand reappraisal of everything that's around me. And so at first it was harder, and then I've been feeling more free to let some of those things go that I never could. And so if anybody else is experiencing things like that, I'd love to hear about that. This is about managing it in the time of COVID-19. So I think everything is amplified right now. If you're living in a home with someone like me who was invading all the space, and you are at the end of your rope, and you are angry, and you are frustrated, and you are feeling like you're tired of being told that there are ways to take care of your family member, I hear you. I'm sure Becca was as well. What I'd like to do is just kind of speak to my peers out there and say, we're going to talk about the mutuality of empathy and understanding where people are coming from, to share the insights, to know what it's like for other people, and to sometimes take their well-being as the starting point when we decide to make change. It's not about letting everything go, but it is about keeping the right things and putting them in the right place so everybody has room to grow and be their full selves. And when we come through this, just imagining what life will look like when we can come and go as we wanted to. Lastly, I just wanted to touch on the point that Randy was making about not being able to go out and treasure hunt. I realized that I've spent a lot of time, even if I wasn't acquiring things, I would go to thrift stores just to browse, just to walk around. And I realized like that was a couple hours out of my day. I didn't acquire anything, but I also didn't get anything done with my task, the ongoing task. So this has also presented me that opportunity to stay with it, and also, you know, to know when to stop. So we're going to look at balance, responsibility, mutuality, all these things that help the world go around and help a household go around. So,
That's awesome. Yeah, and there's, you brought up some great points that I actually see in the comment thread, so we'll bring them up. Sharon Tree, I see your comment. I want to bring it up a little bit later. And if you're watching and you're just joining us, please feel free to load your comments in the comment thread or your questions in the comment thread, and we will get to those questions very soon. Hey, Lee, super quick question for you and Beck, frankly, is this process and this day-to-day a straight line for you? Is it just, is it a roller coaster of a variety of emotions and feelings, and some days you have good days and some days you have bad days, and some days, I mean, what is the experience overall like?
There's no straight line about this. Absolutely not. It's ebbs and flows, and things are good, and then we get into a little dip and we come back up again. And I think it's really important to know that it's totally not a straight line. And there's a lot of communication involved, and you know, daily things like current situations, moods, all kinds of things affect how we cope. And it's very fluid, I would say, in how we manage it.
Yeah, I mean, this is hard for everybody. I've often seen my clutter being almost like the ocean with a tide that seems to come in and go out. And so accepting that there will sometimes be times when things are more cluttered, because actually sometimes getting better does look like getting worse, because when we're working on a project, all this stuff is out. But just maintaining enough space during the process and communicating about why clutter is in certain places so that it's not triggering, honestly, to come into a space that was nice yesterday. And I was working late last night, and surprise, you can't walk through that room. That was awesome yesterday. There's less stuff, but it looks like more because of the process. So yeah, comes and goes. But mathematically speaking, if less stuff is in the house over time, there will be less stuff to have clutter, and it takes less time to get it back in order.
That's a great way to put it. I mean, I kind of live by, you know, have more good days than bad. And if I can do that over the course of a week, then I'm winning. At times during this COVID, I embraced, you know, have more good hours than bad. And if I'm doing that, then I'm winning. So I definitely think the overall picture and seeing the growth is the important stuff. Hi, Dr. Zasio. Sorry to leave you hanging in our bottom left-hand corner. So what have you been seeing in your clinic? What have you been seeing with your patients? What have you been experiencing on your own? Give us an update on everything in your world.
Yeah, and Ethan, gosh, kudos to you for all of these town halls you've been doing. I know you've been so hard at work just trying to make all this happen and get all the information we can out about the different anxiety disorders. So I'm really glad that I'm a part of this because it's just so important to talk about during this time of shelter in place. And thanks for asking about us. I really appreciate that. You know, I know for myself, I've really had to look at my life and the time that I invest in doing things like you said, Lee, and going and browsing and looking and that kind of thing. And I know how much I really enjoy that. And I'm pretty good about only buying the things that I need. But I've noticed this tendency with so much more time on my hand to start going to Amazon just to look. Now, normally I go because I need a book or I need this or that. And now I'm going because I have time and I'm browsing just random things that I don't even need, and just being so cognizant of this is not, you know, a good use of my time. And I'm looking for things that I don't even really need. And the awareness with regard to our clinic that I started pretty short in this whole game I think it really wasn't until shelter was in place where I went, oh my gosh, I've got to start getting paper towels and toilet paper and sanitizer and cleaning products for my clients, because we have about half of our staff that's working from home and half that's coming in, and thinking, oh my gosh, well, I've got to take care of them, and feeling that panic of, what if I can't find this stuff, which of course a lot of it we couldn't. And just really being aware of how we are really all in this together in one way or another, and how it really has caused us to look at so many different aspects of our lives, relationships, Randy, as you mentioned, and Lee being one of them. And I'm really trying to focus on the good that is coming out of this and the changes that I think are happening in our own personal lives, and just really being aware of how, we don't have to have mental health issues to feel panicky and scared and frightened. And, for me, what we're seeing coming into the clinic, we talked about this a little bit earlier before starting this today, and that is, people calling in saying, I should be doing something in my home. I've got all this time now. I'm staying home. The kids are home. I need to start working on this stuff. But I don't know how, but I feel like I should know how. I'm sitting here. Why can't I do this? And we alluded to this in our first town hall, where it's not about cleaning, it's not about just decluttering, it's getting at what's underneath that's preventing you from doing that. And I think that's really something that is a powerful message that all of us have been giving, and that I'm giving my callers, to say this isn't a cleanup process. You have to learn why you've gotten to this place, and then learn how to get out of it. So really emphasizing compassion to my clients, taking care of themselves, not beating themselves up, and giving them resources. Unfortunately, a lot of insurance companies are paying for intensive outpatient treatment, and so it has been nice to go into their homes with them via a platform, and we can see what's going on and walk them through and do the therapy that's needed. So I'm still all about trying to focus what we can make out of all this, rather than what we are not getting out of all this.
That's beautiful. I totally agree, and I think everyone here agrees with you. Again, if you're joining us, please, we're here to answer your questions. So please feel free to ask as many questions as possible, and we're here to answer them. We'll get to them momentarily. Actually, I want to address Sharon shortly. But Dr. Frost, so with COVID and with everything going on, does individuals' approach to clutter and hoarding and those behaviors, does it change mentally because of COVID? Should the strategies that were in place beforehand alter, or is COVID an excuse for maybe giving yourself a little room to do things that aren't necessarily the most productive within treatment and therapy?
That's an interesting question, Ethan. We don't know for sure what the effect of short-term stress is on hoarding behaviors per se. Like other disorders, other anxiety disorders, for instance, increased pressure or increased outside stress does seem to increase symptomatology, but in hoarding, it's not entirely clear that that's the case. I do know a number of people who said that under stressful conditions, they seem to be better able to deal with it. They're somehow more focused and work harder at it. So I think it's probably an individual difference kind of thing, where some people, when they get stressed, have harder time working on dealing with clutter, and for some people, it sort of helps them focus their attention.
That makes a lot of sense, and I'm just trying to relate this to my own OCD experiences. I know that a lot of those without hoarding disorder, are trying to find this maneuver the gray area between what they should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing, and why the situation may or may not be different. Lee and Beck, how has your approach to your own stuff changed with shelter in place and with COVID, and how you're, from before all of this, has it changed?
Yeah, well, I'll say one of the things that we talk a lot about in Buried in Treasures and Rat Producing Clutter is our vulnerabilities and being self-aware. When are we more vulnerable to holding on to things or to acquiring new things? And this crisis pretty much checks all the boxes for me. And so I would say I'm almost more vulnerable to the stressors I feel right now, but I'm not responding to them. I guess when I feel like I want things, what's happening is I'm actually coping with the stress by organizing and sorting. And what I've done is I'm keeping a journal and I'm writing down what the tough news of the day is for me, and then what I did with that stress. So I know there was one specific news broadcast that was really, really upsetting. And after that, I spent 3 hours and I alphabetized all my Atari cartridges. So, and I found duplicates and I put them aside. I'm actually finding working on organizing to be a really helpful self-soothing activity. And I would encourage people to look at things not as so much necessarily as what you want to get rid of, as you might have heard in the past, but just being really careful and looking for where you want to put things and how much you can fit, and just saving the best of the best.
Beck, how have you maneuvered supportingly during this time, and knowing that things might change in terms of his response to the triggers and stimuli going on outside? Has that changed your approach on and with your clients as well?
Mm-hmm. I think emphasizing communication and warm, open communication is really important, and also helping each other, because mutuality is what we're all about. It's helping each other. So the onus is not on one person to change or be changed. We work together to do it. And I think staying on top of things has been really helpful. Like if I see something going astray, I'll pull it back on top rather than just say, oh, forget it. We'll deal with this when COVID's over. I think that can be a temptation to just get the world a mess, just set it aside. But I think looking around daily and seeing what little things can we do to keep ourselves in order and comfortable as much as possible has been really helpful.
Yeah, I asked Becca what I can give her a hand with too, because if she's sorting papers or something like that, I've got a lot of experience with it. So it's like, you want a hand with something you're working on, even if it's just me sitting there sipping on a cup of tea while she works, I can be helpful for her process too. I think we can all do that. So stopping and asking if we can do something for someone else too goes both ways.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's huge. I mean, I've always said from the beginning, Mike Janicki told me the best thing I can do for my OCD is help others. And it is something I've taken to heart and use every day. And it is probably the most effective way I can keep my own OCD in check, and maintenance and managing. And so asking of yourself to others is also, you're absolutely right, Lee. I'll get the questions in just a minute. Again, I encourage you to ask them if you have them. Robin, I was thinking about earlier conversations we were having in email chains. And just for those watching, I know, and Lee and I talked about this more, but I want to address it with you because you are in the media and on. So what have we been seeing? How has the stigma around hoarding disorder kind of changed with COVID, and how is terminology changing and being used? What's offensive to the community? What isn't offensive to the community? How would you like to see media and the public address, the difference between I'm going to go out and make sure I have what I need for this and hoarding disorder? What are you seeing, and what's bothering you? What isn't bothering you?
I think there's a couple things in terms of stigma. I mean, I think that some of that is lessening as we're able to do more media work and help the community better understand that this is a mental health condition. We don't judge people who have depression. We don't judge people who, have generalized anxiety. And we don't need to judge people who are struggling with acquisition and getting rid of their stuff. And I think that there's been a really good attempt to do that. And of course, with the IOCDF conference every year, the hoarding track was created, and I think things are going in a really positive direction. And I think that also as more research is going on, that people are understanding the disorder so much better than I think 10, 15, 20 years ago. I think also, we had you had talked last week, Lee, about, the term hoarder. And if you refer to yourself as a hoarder, that's your term. But certainly some people feel very offended by it. And, for me, it's not a judgment if we refer to somebody on my end, if they say, yes, I'm a hoarder. I don't see that as a judgment. I mean, my book is called The Hoarder in You, and it's not just about people who are struggling with hoarding disorder. It's anybody, any of us on the continuum who is struggling with acquisition and difficulty letting go. I posted a picture on Facebook of over 75 pairs of shoes that I got rid of. That's my thing. I love shoes. And I was buying shoes not because I needed them, but because they were cute and they were a good deal. And if I didn't get them and I walked away, I just keep thinking about it and thinking about it. Why did you walk away? And you really like those. And so finally I had to do this thing where it was one in, one out. But I had acquired so many that I had 3 layers on each row of shoes piled up on one another. And I finally got so sick and tired of being sick and tired, pulling those shoes out and trying to find the match and this, that, or whatever. That was the hoarder in me, shoes. And now they're nicely lined up, and it just feels so good to be able to see those shoes and pull them out and to not have that overwhelm of having to search through stuff. So long roundabout way, I think we're gaining some strides. I think these conversations are so important. And so many people can go back on these town halls and through the IOCDF and get so much more information and learn, and having these really open conversations about, you are not your stuff. You are a person who struggles with stuff. Just as somebody who has depression that's not what represents them, or someone who has cancer, that's not who they are. They're a person that has a condition. And I think the more that we validate that concept, I think more people are going to feel more open about feeling like they can reach out, because there are a lot of resources now that I think a lot of people didn't have before.
Lee, I know you have thoughts on this subject. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. I saw a comment under the video from the town hall last week that was saying that someone said, I didn't think this was about OCD. Why does that guy have all those framed pictures on the wall behind him? And, what I want to kind of bring some attention to is sort of saying, that's as if I were to write a book called The OCD in Me. It's not OCD. I really dig displaying my things carefully, and that's fun. OCD is not fun. Hoarding is not fun. These are painful experiences that a lot of us are working really hard to overcome. So it's not necessarily the hoarder in you. It could be the shoe lover in you, using skills that help those of us who do struggle with hoarding disorder to overcome that challenge. So I want to I saw someone in the comments earlier wondering if it was hoarding because they had too much hand sanitizer. That may be what you're hearing on the news, but it's not necessarily the case. So look around. If you have more than you could actually use personally, maybe donate it. But just because you have been stressed out and bought, as much as you could, doesn't mean it's hoarding disorder, but it does mean you're afraid. So I did want to just kind of mention that this is not the OCD in me. This is the collector in me, and this is the recovering collector in me that's getting his life back together.
And I think, too, it's important to distinguish between what OCD is and what hoarding disorder is. And so many people are using OCD as their description of, I have OCD. And then I'll say, well, what is the theme of your OCD? And they'll say, well, I collect way too much stuff. And I'll say, oh, okay. And this is, again, why these talks are so important, is we can distinguish between what you're talking about, Lee. I'm a collector. It's organized. There's a system, versus OCD. That's very, very different versus hoarding disorder. And stockpiling, which you alluded to last week too. People going out and stockpiling, which is very different than hoarding disorder.
If I could add,
I was calling you. Go ahead, Randy.
If I could add something too, I know that some people have responded to the language used in describing stockpiling as hoarding, and feeling kind of stigmatized that now they're being sort of denigrated for this behavior that in hoarding disorder is out of control. But in stockpiling, it's a little bit different phenomenon, and I think it's important to make that distinction.
Absolutely. I think that, just like with OCD specifically, without hoarding, you can obsess, you can compulse. It doesn't mean that you have the disorder. And I would imagine you can collect, you can buy extra of. It doesn't mean that you're a hoarder or have hoarding disorder. And differentiating that D, both in ED and HD, the disorder is what makes it cross over from collecting or a quirk or a habit or something like that into that area where it really impedes functionality, and really defining that difference. You can buy stuff, you can buy extra stuff, but there's an emotional component to it. I think differentiating between those things is important. Let's bring up Jess. Let's pull up Sharon Tree's comment at 1:05 p.m. I think this is a good place to start discussing. Sharon writes, I have always bought multiples and kept stuff for a rainy day. I was getting better at getting rid of stuff, but COVID provided a rainy day, and I can't see getting rid of stuff ever again. I think this is a great point. I talk about all the time, what if my OCD is right? And then when it is right and proves it right, I'm like, oh my God, and I think this might be one of those scenarios, which is I've been training for this and now it's here, and I knew I should have kept all this stuff, and you guys were let's start. I know Lee and Beck definitely have some thoughts on this. What are your thoughts to, saving for a rainy day? That rainy day is here. This validates my thoughts and my thinking. And yeah, go ahead and weigh in.
I think that rainy days imply having nothing to do. And right now there's too much to do. And even though we're not rushing from meeting to meeting and it can feel like you're not doing anything, our minds are probably racing. And but if it's a rainy day, it's a thunderstorm, it's a hurricane up there. And so the feeling that you should be able to get done because it's a rainy day, where actually a lot of people are in panic mode, either consciously or unconsciously. And no matter what you're trying to do, it could be impeding that progress. I know a lot of people, you showed me a cartoon the other day, like, oh, I thought this was going to be the time to finish that novel. And it was a person, in a rowboat with one oar with the boat sinking behind him. It's not necessarily the time to make all the progress you had hoped for. I happen to be doing really well with it right now. But I was already on that trajectory. So for me, it has been helpful, but please, be kind to yourself. If you're finding that you're not doing anything, don't try to do everything. Just look for one thing. Trick yourself into being able to do it. Say, I'm going to go find one red thing and put it where it should go. Just start with that and call that a job done. And when you're ready, go back and do the next item. But that's sort of what it's been like for me.
And I've been thinking about, sorry, Ethan, do you want to go ahead?
I was just going to reiterate some of the question points. We'll bring it up in a second. A little bit of tech difficulties, no problem. But she says, I always bought multiples and kept stuff for a rainy day. I was getting better at getting rid of stuff, but COVID provided a rainy day. Now that day is here that I've always prepared for, and I can't see getting rid of stuff ever again. So that's kind of what she was alluding to. Go ahead, Beck.
I'm wondering if the saving for a rainy day and the rainy days here now, are people finding that they're actually using all the things that they've saved? Because I think that's something to reflect upon. You have it, but are you making use of it? If you have too much things like sanitizer and stuff, the medical workers are always making a call out. So maybe if you're stuck in your home, it's a great use to say, here's the rainy day saving. I can present this to people who really have an active need for it. And that's a way to turn it around. And a lot of times when we meet people who are finder keepers and they're holding on to things, there's that feeling of, I would give it away if I had the right place or the right opportunity. So this event might provide the right opportunity for certain people, to feel like there's a better place for these things I've been keeping. And for someone who's been keeping art supplies, let's say, because they weren't going to be able to get to a store someday, well, now's that day. Are you able to take out those supplies and do things with them? That's my hope for everyone who has been saving. Can you move past it a little to make use of all the things that you're saving? Make it an active part of your life.
Go ahead, Randy.
If I could chime in a bit, one of the things I think is worth thinking about with respect to this particular topic is what are the costs and benefits of saving all these things? Because if for years you've been unable to use your kitchen, or if for years you've had this constant conflict with family members about it, is that a benefit to saving all these things for this particular time, sort of once in a lifetime period where you may need some of the stockpiles that you have? And another point related to it has to do with one's belief in one's ability to be resourceful. Can you find these things if you need them in a period of scarcity? And I suspect that what's happened is that most people have discovered that they can find. They do have resources. Maybe it's not in the stores, but friends and family, if they know they're running short, often will supply people with things that they need. So it's really a question that has to do with the cost of doing it and the benefits of doing it. And I think that kind of analysis is just the sort of thing that will help people learn how to appraise their possessions in a way that makes their life more fulfilled.
I think that's such a great point, Randy, because I was thinking that very thing. From a non-hoarding but OCD perspective, it's if I have 999 clear days and one rainy day, and I'm preparing for that rainy day 999 days, then I'm really missing out on the things that I value most and things that are important to me, and living in the moment and being mindful and being rooted in the here and now. As opposed to, and it's like, is it worth giving up those 999 days for that one day that may or may not come? And can I trust my ability to be able to cope when that day comes and be able to be, scrappy and get what I need done? And so I totally, the cost benefit analysis is really important. Robin, do you have anything to add on that?
I think the only thing that I was thinking about is, are people still using all the same stuff that they were using before? Or are they finding now that they're, it's shelter in place, that they are in fact using all these other things that they've been saving for a rainy day? And I think that would be an interesting thing for people to look at, are they bringing in stuff still that they don't need because of that rainy day? Or are they finding that life is very much still the same in terms of the things I'm eating, the things I'm drinking, the amount of cleaning I'm doing, the clothes I'm wearing, and then really separating out, even though I'm stuck in my home, I'm still using all the same stuff, which allows them to continue to look at the stuff that they're holding on to and their relationship to it.
It's a great point. Let's go to Diane Morisseau at 1:11 p.m. This isn't a question per se, but I think this is a great topic of conversation. She says, it's difficult for me because I'm legally separated and I'm in my married home. Lots of memories and lots of cleanup from my ex. So I would imagine that's a pretty triggering predicament in terms of, I think I'm alluding that she's quarantined in her home, even though but may not be living in a home where she's separated. You kind of put yourself in that position, Lee, and weigh in on maybe some of the things that she's going through?
Well, I think if we're surrounded by things that are upsetting, it sounds like maybe those are the things to start moving out of our periphery, to start bringing things forward that mean more to us and give us comfort. Maybe this is, and I'm not totally clear on the question. I think if it's about recognizing what's really important and what isn't, this might be that sort of moment of reckoning where you say, this is actually behind me and these are the artifacts from a time that I'm no longer living in. And maybe now I can be, here now. What represents me and what represents the me I want to be moving forward? If the person that owns those things is still there, then that's going to be a conversation, I think, of balance and making sure you both have things that are meaningful. but maybe having some spaces carved out where there aren't any of those things. You know, finding a place where you can sit and read a book and look up and not see any of those other things might be helpful, almost like an oasis.
Yeah, she follows up by saying, "I think the house brings me to PTSD." So definitely, you know, some triggering moments by coming across artifacts and pictures. Anything, and you're right. She isn't particularly asking a question. She's just saying she's living in her home that she once married. So lots of things around her that are triggering and causing a lot of emotion for her. Randy,
I think what I would say is that this may provide an opportunity to work through some of those issues related to the PTSD, especially if she has a therapist who she can communicate with. But one of the things that we often find with respect to hoarding disorder is that when things are in someone's home, that is, once they come into the home, they're often not ever looked at again. And there's very little time spent interacting with those objects in the home. And what I've seen is that when we simply ask people to take a look at these things and talk about them, it provides them a way of working through the emotion associated with it, working through what the meaning those objects have for them. And in doing so, it's a way of processing the kinds of ways in which this possession is important to me or perhaps is not important to me. And so I think that may provide an opportunity. And in this particular time where we are all sort of housebound, it does allow you to take a different perspective on things. At least for me, it's made me think about, well, what is it important to me in my life? What is it that I want to do that I can't do? And how does that fit into the way I want to live my life? And that's good fodder for being able to evaluate, is this possession consistent with what I come up with in terms of what I want to do with my life?
I know, Robin, you had it.
Yeah, and Randy, your comment is very similar to what I was going to say, but it's all connected to the values. You know, what do I want my life to look like? And you know, when you're going through a separation or a divorce or you know, just anything in life, you know, what is going to drive you to do the hard work, and looking at, you know, what you want your home to look like now that you're in this separation. How does that relate to your stuff? Because I agree. I think it was you, Lee, where you said, you know, what are these memories bringing for you? Are they bringing up painful stuff that just makes you feel badly, or is it making you feel better? And creating a home that supports and really facilitates all of those values. And I think that when you can kind of pull that up, it can really help you to start making some decisions. And of course, we've always talked about this concept that, you know, people get sort of hung up on the memories being stuck in the stuff. Like, you know, if I give up this sweatshirt, if I give up this item, you know, I'm gonna forget the memory. And, you know, yeah, the stuff does pull up that memory, but it's not what holds the memory. And I think that's really important to remember too.
Yeah, and I would think, and feel free to correct me, any of you, because but I would also feel like, you know, the approach of waking up every day, expecting that you're going to have feelings and thoughts around this stuff, because it is around, and being compassionate with yourself and being willing to feel the feelings that are uncomfortable, and not try to suppress or avoid those feelings. And then, as Lee said, you know, early on, he was like, listen, I'm having thoughts, I'm having feelings about this stuff, but it's my response to that really counts. And what I'm being mindful of is how I respond to those thoughts and feelings. And I would say the expectation of not wanting to have those feelings is okay, but maybe, you know, accepting that I'm going to, and it's okay. And I can be compassionate toward those feelings, and I know what to do in response to them. I'm looking for reassurance here. Terrible idea. No.
Yeah, no.
Agreed.
I was giving everybody else an opportunity. I was thinking, you know, what's been fascinating for me is this sort of search back through my life and peeling back layers. Something that I've experienced a lot of people talk about is being afraid of seeing what's in that box. And it's sort of a Pandora's box of emotions. You don't know what's in there, and it's brave to look. And what I've found is that as I've culled out a lot of things that aren't necessarily important, I've come to make associations and understand why certain things are comforting, because I can actually connect them back to when they were first playing a role in my life. When did these things first bring me comfort? And then think about that. And what I noticed was I saved things that brought me comfort during difficult times. And ironically, I saved things that represented those difficult times. So I found that I had a collection of things from the Space Shuttle Challenger. I had a collection of things from when the Gulf War started. I had a collection of things from the World Trade Center. And I started to notice that I wanted to keep things related to this experience. And so being able to gain clarity in the meaning of why I kept things that gave me comfort, but also the things that I've kept that represent discomfort, I've been able to make some value judgments and choices based on that, and think about myself a little bit more and what that means, and also kind of put myself in the future looking back. What did I save from this period? And what was important? And finding comfort in things I have and not bringing in more things that'll upset me someday. So, you know, it's about identity, it's about opportunity, it's about all of these different things we talk about, but underlying all of that are some really deep psychological roots that go back maybe past what we can remember. And as we start to explore, those things come up. So it's about taking care of the items, taking care of our partners, and also just the self-care, because all of these things are coming up. It might really tear at your heart and your soul. And you might say, I can't do this. I'm done. I can't do this. And that's the time when, you know, do something to help yourself get through that moment. Call someone up to talk and just unwind with them a little bit. But notice these patterns. I noticed that I was starting to keep things that were like, I started to consider keeping things that I was going to let go a couple months ago that are kind of like morbid, almost like dark. And I noticed myself starting to bring them back out of the let go box. And I was like, why? What is that about? And then I put them back aside. But this is just where it begins. I'm trying to do myself a favor to my future self by not saving these things. I'm keeping a little journal, and I'm taking screenshots of interesting headlines, but I'm not saving the whole newspaper. I'm not, you know, bringing in all these other, you know, artifacts of this time. So it's an interesting thing, but it's hard to make those connections when you just have everything. I've only been able to make those connections probably within the last year.
Thank you, Lee. I appreciate that. Let's go to Bonnie Lenz at 1:35 p.m. She asks, sometimes it seems, I think Jess will put this up in 1 sec. Sometimes it seems like when my avoidance rituals are worse in other areas of OCD, my clutter problems decrease because I use decluttering to avoid worse fears. Is that good or bad? It seems to help on the one hand, but then I worry that I should be doing something else. I'll throw this to Randy, and I can reiterate as soon as Jess pulls it up if you want me to reiterate the question. But Randy, thoughts?
Sure. Yeah, this is sort of a classic kind of procrastination experience, isn't it? That I think many of us, when we procrastinate on something, there's something we're really not eager to do, and something else we don't like doing, but it's less aversive than the first thing we've been considering, and so we end up doing that. And I think one thing that might be worth thinking about is, okay, can you use this strategy in some way to push you along in doing the things you want to do? Can you use it to get more decluttering done, and then somehow turn it around and find something with your OCD rituals that might make it easier to do those than doing something with the hoarding or the decluttering? So it might be possible to the way you experience it, use the way you experience it to kind of shift things around to further both goals.
Robin, do you have anything to add? We can go ahead and remove the graphic so we can see Robin.
You know, I think, Randy, you said it beautifully. And, you know, I don't know, you know, those words, good or bad, like there's so much judgment laden in there. And I think that when whenever you avoid, it's going to stay there. It's not going to go anywhere, and it's going to come up at some point. But if you're using it as a sort of a stress management type coping skill, and it's getting you in a positive direction, I think that's the most important thing really to look at. But definitely taking those value judgments of the good and bad, it just is. And if it's working for you and it's not harmful in any way, then, I don't see anything wrong with it.
Lee or Beck, any thoughts from?
Again, like Randy and Robin have said, if it's getting you to a better place that's not making life harder for you, it's okay. If you're procrastinating using something that's positive and it's setting you back in another area of your life, then you've got to kind of rebalance the equation, I think.
Yeah, and I think personally, like I've moved past the point of crisis in our home where Becca would probably have wished I was working on it 24/7. I realized that actually yesterday I was working on some sorting, and I realized, I should check in on Becca and see how she's doing, because I was sort of all in my own world, like down that rabbit hole, and realizing there's someone else here who's, going through this time as well, and maybe I should check in. So if the, working on things is an escape from stress, making sure I'm not leaving other people behind is important. Just because, I got to take care of myself. We got to take care of each other too.
That's great. Thank you so much. I will read the whole thing. I think Jess will have shortened this question, but OCD interrupted at 1:35 p.m. Said, just had a session with my therapist over the phone, and I found a bag of papers from 2006 to 2014. Found a few things from third grade and found taxes from 2008. I'm afraid to throw away the 2008 taxes, but I know they probably aren't necessary. Thoughts? Go ahead, Lee.
Okay. So not my legal specialty, but those tax papers ought to be old enough at this point that you can let them go. If you're not sure, go to a reliable source like the IRS website and double check. But different kinds of documents need to be held on for different amounts of time. I used to always go by a 7-year rule of thumb for tax papers. Then I heard a little bit longer, then a little bit shorter. So I think it's important to go right to the source to get, questions answered like that. But we did a presentation for a local municipality where the people working there were holding on to all kinds of things as archives. And even though there was a rule about when things needed to be let go, they were holding on to them anyway. So do yourselves a favor. If you're concerned about how long to hold on to something and you're being given permission to let it go with it. That might be a risk worth taking. And if you can't do the whole pile at once, just try letting a couple things go and see how that feels. So it's not an all or nothing thing. Maybe let January of 2008 go first, and then see if you can do February next.
Randy or Robin?
Yeah, I agree with Lee. I use a 7-year rule for keeping taxes. I think most of us, our tax situation isn't so complicated that we need to save things beyond that. But if yours is, then it would be worth checking with IRS. But in all likelihood, it's probably okay.
So I have a pretty novice question, because this and any of you can answer it. But I know with non-hoarding related OCD, we don't necessarily want to check that often. I think that using like a therapist or a peer support specialist as a baseline guideline to help us navigate the things that we may not have insight into is okay. But at a certain point, I don't think that the OCD will ever be satisfied with whatever answer we get. We'll always question. So, out of curiosity, with hoarding, do we want to look, do we want to look for those right answers and then keep looking to make sure, or how much uncertainty is important to utilize in deciding what to keep and what to throw away?
Well, I think it's that doubt and uncertainty that's really what it's all about. Not wanting to make a mistake and the regret. And like we were talking about earlier, the feelings that come up and not wanting to feel those feelings. And, if you think about this box that she's referencing that she had completely forgot about, that if somehow that box went away, might not even at any point really think about it. And it's always interesting that when people find things, all of us, that we go, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about this. But yet it's been tucked away for, years under the bed or in the closet or, and I think that tolerating that doubt and uncertainty and being willing to risk, that is really what it's all about, right? I mean, Ethan, the exposure with OCD is I'm going to do this and I'm going to tolerate that doubt and uncertainty that what I fear may happen, and I mentioned this last week that overall, when I'm working with people, generally they feel so much better afterwards. And even though it was tough in the moment, all those cognitive distortions, those negative thinking patterns that they were convinced were going to happen, they just don't find that they happen to the degree that they thought. And with that risk, they can get certainty about that process, meaning I let it go and it was okay after all.
I think, and to add on to what Robin is saying, one of the things that we try to do in therapy is we get people to think of themselves as sort of scientists for themselves. That is, creating experiments to test themselves, to test their attachment to these possessions. So if I have something from 2006, or if I have third grade papers, what happens? What will happen if you throw it away? And creating a hypothesis out of that. What will happen to my life that is so terrible if I throw this away? And then testing it out. And what we find is that when people do let go of things, number one, the bad things they think might happen don't happen. And number two, sometimes bad things happen if you throw something away. It happens to all of us. We throw something away and a week later we find we need it. But what we discover is that we can get by without it, that we are resourceful enough to be able to find other ways to fulfill the needs that particular object serves. So a lot of this is really learning about yourself by experimenting. And the only way we really know how much an object means to us is when we process it and think about, well, what can I do? Can I do without it? And maybe if I get rid of it, then I learn a little bit more about its true value to me.
I love that. I'm a huge acceptance commitment therapy guy and ACT guy, and that selfish context and being curious about the things that you're engaging in is I think some of the most powerful stuff, especially in my own OCD journey. So I love that. Incidentally, she did follow up and she said, I save it because the taxes. I save it because of hoarding, not the 7 years. And then she put a good vibes. So I love that she has insight into what's happening. And if we take that insight and apply it to what she said, I just had a session with my therapist, but then I found all this stuff. It then becomes, to me at least, about distress tolerance and tolerating this comfort. Like maybe I was feeling okay because I had my therapy appointment and then I just found all this stuff and now I'm feeling super uncomfortable and, I don't know what to do. So, but I think working with that insight that she knows that it's, that she's keeping it because of hoarding and not because, she can use that to then react in a healthy way. Go ahead, Randy. I know you have.
Right. Yeah. And I think distress tolerance is really a key feature here, because when you do something like an experiment where you throw something away, the distress will be there and it will be strong and it will be powerful. And you may feel like it'll never go away. But in truth, it's an experiment to learn what happens to that distress when you do the discarding, because it does go away. And over time, it makes the process easier. It makes it easier for you to evaluate the true nature of that object for your life.
Thank you, Randy. Go ahead,
can I just
Robin.
throw something in, because we didn't mention this last week, but I think when people are looking to approach starting to declutter, that it is important to have somewhat of a system. So rather than say I'm going to start with this box, to create your own hierarchy whereby you can say, okay, what are the different categories that I have? If I were to imagine working on this category, what would my anxiety level be? Because she had noted in her comment the SUDS level, the subjective units of distress scale. And I think being able to call that up and to say, okay, if I had to imagine letting go of these taxes from, I think it was 2007, what do I anticipate I might feel on that SUDS level? Some people do, 1 to 10. Some people do 1 to 100. I think that's just a comfort level. But I think being able to call that up so that you can say, I think that is going to be a little too much for me right now. I think I'm going to start with something that might be a little bit easier for me.
Yeah, I totally agree with not necessarily trying to do the hardest thing first. Go for the low-hanging fruit. Go for the things that you feel less uncomfortable dealing with. Some people think it doesn't count if it's not hard. I think it's great to get the practice muscle going. Something that might be helpful if you are seeing this as sort of, you're not really sure what it is exactly, but you have a feeling it's more about the distress. It's not an objective decision like, oh, good, now I know I can let it go. Gone. For some people, that'll work. But that might just be one question out of several that you ask yourself so that you have something to go back to and ask yourself. One of them might be, are these papers still current? Do I need to save them? If that's not enough questions, then you might be asking, do I have enough room? Is this something that somebody else needs? Could I get this if I needed it again? Do I have another one and I'm just not sure where to find it? Could I keep a digital copy and let the physical copy go? So just like when we're out and we have the opportunity to acquire, and I guess virtually out if we're online, these questions we're asking ourselves about what to bring into the home are almost the same that I use when I'm thinking about saving something, because in a way, I'm reacquiring it. If I come across it for the first time in a while in my home, it's like I am acquiring it again for the first time. And you always get another chance to make that decision. So maybe I don't save it this time. But having a strategy and a list of questions to go to, match that up with a hierarchy of attachments to things, and have all of these value systems work together, that's great. And also just reaching out to other people who might experience this and get some peer support, other people that get it, who know what it's like, that it doesn't have to make sense to be real, that you can be having these feelings and you're not alone. And somebody else might be able to say, you know what, you try letting one of those go and I'll try letting one of my things go, and let's touch base again in a half an hour and see how it went. I think we can do this together.
Thank you. Thank you, Lee. Sorry, I was reading. So Ellen Daniels at 1:36 p.m. asked, why does it seem like there is a glass wall preventing me from getting started on decluttering? There a glass wall preventing me from getting started on decluttering. Robin, why don't you start?
It's an interesting analogy. I almost wonder if it feels like a glass wall because you're sitting there, you're looking at it, it's right in front of you, but you can't move forward. And I think it ties into so many different concepts that we've talked about in terms of the fear of what they're going to feel, and all the thoughts that come along with the anticipated regret or loss. And we know that procrastination is one of the biggest offenders when it comes to, letting go of your stuff because of all of those things that you're afraid that are going to come up. And I think that that's why I think that therapeutic component is so important to really understand why you're getting stuck. I say this probably 1,000 times a year, that it's not about a cleanup process. It's about uncovering the psychological factors that are leading to the acquisition, that are leading to the stuff letting go. And so I think really validating that, it does feel like a glass wall. And there's so many different components that are going to work for so many different people. Ethan, you talked about how much you like the ACT work. That doesn't work for everybody. So I think if you look at all the different strategies that are out there, again, there are so many self-help books. There's the annual IOCDF conference that hopefully will be coming up soon this year. That there's a lot of information out there to help you figure out why you're getting stuck, because it's not going to be the same for everybody.
Go ahead, Randy. Yeah.
I think part of the issue here with the glass wall is that the clutter in most people's homes, most people who suffer from hoarding disorder, didn't occur overnight. It's something that's built up over the decades most often. And so when you look at your house and think about decluttering, and you're thinking about, well, I want to have a house that's uncluttered, it seems overwhelming. It seems that there isn't enough time in your lifetime to clear out all this stuff, particularly if you have trouble and takes a long time to throw one object away or to get rid of one object or to release one object. So I think that glass wall in part has to do with the perspective that you're taking at the outset. Rather than looking at this as decluttering, looking at it as getting started with evaluating the possessions in your mind. So in that way, it's not so discouraging when you spend a day on just a few items, but it's important to spend the day on those few items to get yourself started. And then when you're able to get to the point where you can declutter an area, then it feels much better. And that sense of being overwhelmed is not so prominent.
Go ahead, Lee.
I'd like to go back to the sort of the idea of just thinking about who might be living on the other side of that glass wall. If you're feeling like you're stuck with letting things go, think about the people that are living with that stuff as well. Because if I think about working on everything at once, I get completely overwhelmed and I stop. It was really important in our household for me to ask Becca what was important to her. And so that might be a different avenue to take as well when you start to ask people what's important to them, and not just what's important to you, and to take other people's considerations into put them into action there, because oftentimes once somebody else is expressing what they want, you find actually that's not a bad idea, and maybe that's something I can do. And it's not necessarily about letting everything go. As we've shared a couple of times, it might just be about opening up paths so that things are more accessible and more safe. And if you're somebody that's living in somebody else's clutter, I've heard the message, don't give ultimatums. I'm telling you, stick up for yourself and set some limits. It might just be the thing that helps you get through the day. And for people that are creating the clutter, we're taking the personal responsibility. Maybe this is a new day and we're turning the page and we're looking at things differently and acknowledging that it might not be our fault that we struggle with this diagnosis, but it is our responsibility to do something about it. It's really hard when you want to work on it, but you're spinning your wheels. Maybe you're not getting through that glass wall because you just can't get traction. The traction is about education. And so that is sort of important just to consider that even if we don't know why it's hard, we'll understand why it's important to work on it. That cost-benefit analysis, is it worth the damage it's doing to somebody else's life just to make mine a little less uncomfortable? So these are some really deep questions. I know I'm putting a lot out there, and it may or may not directly address that question, but there might be people on the other side of that glass wall. Look for a window, open it up and talk through it, even if you can't get through it right now. Just start the conversation and ask what you can do. And maybe it's return. What can we do for each other?
And to follow along with getting through that wall, I think it's really important to have something besides, I should do this because I should do it. I think it's important to find positive motivators for yourself. Be it might be a nice space to read a book in, be it might make it easier to cook. If you can find real practical reasons to motivate you, I think it can help breaking through that.
Thank you, Beck. Hey, Nikki in Ireland, by the way, good to see you. We can drop the question, Jess. Some people are leaving some interesting comments. Just thought I'd say them out loud. Linda Fay said, "I agree, Lee. Starting small and safe will help with a sense of achievement to enhance motivation." Marnie Cooper reads, says, "My anxiety always goes down after I let go of my items." Sorry, screen adjustment. It's definitely getting easier. Thank you, Randy and Robin, for your brilliant books. This is an interesting comment. I'd be curious. So Linda also writes, "I try to avoid using the word declutter and instead use organize or let go. Declutter always feels negative, I think." You have it isn't a question. I just think it's an interesting, some words feel more stigmatizing than others.
I kind of feel like the clutter was almost like putting the disorder in disorder. Like that word actually made sense. For me, I call it clutter, and I don't like clutter. And that's actually where I'm at right now, is recognizing like I'm pretty good at creating it, even if you know, I'm trying to let things go, it still gets disorganized. So I guess whatever we call it, you know, I'm not calling anyone a clutterer necessarily, but I've got clutter, you know, and that's what I'm sorting through. But thinking about it almost as like deleting what's not necessary, going through and editing and revising my acquisitions. You know, I'm a collector at the heart of this, but the excessive part is the emotional component. So there's a part of the acquiring that I've enjoyed, and there's the outcome that I haven't enjoyed. So, you know, the clutter, you know, yeah, whatever is upsetting for you to hear, let people know. Some people really don't like certain words, and it's really helpful to hear that and bring that into the conversation. Because if I'm saying something that's harmful to somebody and I don't know it, I won't change. But if I know better, then I can do better.
I think it works on both sides. Just to play devil's advocate too, I know that, you know, there's been this movement in the OCD community of whether we call I'm OCD, call us client or patients, right? And some people prefer clients, some people prefer patients, but then you have to look at what's more stigmatizing. You know, I have OCD, so why can't I be called patient? And maybe it's uncomfortable, but it's only uncomfortable if I don't separate myself from the OCD. If my identity is OCD, then I might be offended by patient. But if I recognize that my is a disorder, not a decision, no different than diabetes or cancer or anything else, then perhaps I'm more okay with the word patient, because I know that it's not in any way an attack on Ethan the individual. It's speaking to the disorder itself. So I also think it's important to like be mindful of words that we use in a way to maybe lessen our own stigmatizing self of whatever we're dealing with. And maybe it's okay to be a little bit uncomfortable with some words and embracing who we are and what we have, and those things aren't necessarily the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think your point about just having that communication and saying, you know, I really don't like this word very much, or this doesn't resonate with me. Can you refer to this as letting it go, or whatever it is? And, you know, understanding that, you know, we're all people who are trying to learn about who we're working with. Who are you as a person, and what is going to work best for you? And, you know, kind of going back to, some people say, you know what, I call myself a hoarder and that works for me, and other people feel very offended by it. That's just another example of just, you know, making sure you know who your customer is and working with them and what works best for them.
And not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Yep.
OCD Interrupted had a second. This isn't a question per se, but I would imagine Lee's touched on this somewhat about taking pictures of things. She wrote also digital hoarding is really a killer for me. It's extremely difficult for me. It's anything digital plus social media. I personally have never heard the term digital hoarding, although when Lee was talking about taking pictures, I know that I take pictures for references and things. I have 10,000 pictures in my camera roll that I never delete. I wouldn't call myself a hoarder in that way. But can you guys speak to digital hoarding a little bit, maybe what it is and why it's kind of a dangerous rabbit hole per se? Go ahead, Lee.
So a few years ago, I was actually the national spokesperson for Hotmail, and did some work going and speaking about the problems that come up with this. And I think for me, the biggest thing that I look at is how much time are you spending in the digital world, going back and reviewing and looking and scanning and revisiting those documents. And you know, I think it can have the very same consequences of creating disruption. How much time are you spending, you know, copying things, saving things, storing things? How much money are you spending getting more and more email accounts because you don't have enough room in the account that you have? And, you know, again, this idea of values, like, do you want to spend, you know, lots of time just holding on to stuff that you're probably not going to access, or are you willing to let go and tolerate that doubt and uncertainty that maybe at some point you may need that? I mean, I think we've all been in that place where we're going, oh, why did I delete that email? But usually what you find is that it's not as catastrophic as you think it's going to be.
Lee, I know. Oh, go ahead, Randy, and then we'll get to Lee.
Yeah, there are a couple of studies now out on digital hoarding, and I think Robin's right. Is the place where digital hoarding becomes problematic is if it ends up taking a lot of time that could be devoted to something else and interferes with your ability to carry out the things you'd like to carry out in your life. But I think in terms of how it relates to hoarding disorder, probably has more to do with some of the information processing deficits that we know go along with hoarding. And one of those is the inability to categorize, or difficulty categorizing and difficulty organizing. Because for the most part, you can pretty much save however much digitally you want to, if it's organized well enough that it can be retrieved easily. And there are strategies for doing that. And for people with digital hoarding, typically these things are saved digitally, but in a completely disorganized fashion. So it interferes with their ability to access the kinds of information digitally that they need to access. So I think that's a part of how it's related. Now, there is also, for some people, a form of OCD that's like this, and some people refer to it as life editing OCD, where the person has to keep a record of everything in their life, and they feel compelled to do that, and that sort of ritualized recounting of everything in their life. Sometimes it's done digitally by pictures and so forth. And that's a little bit separate from what we would call hoarding disorder.
Yeah, I'll let you speak to this, Lee, but she goes on to specify more. She wrote, not revisiting, more saving as physical hoarding, but digital. And then she wrote, yes, organizing, and I have need to know OCD. So Lee, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's cool to think about, what we have is digital content actually affects our computers and our phones the same way as it does our physical world. If you've got a lot of stuff and it's not labeled and organized, you can't find it. You tend to keep more copies of things than you need because you're not sure if you already have it. It slows down the system. If your phone has ever said you're running out of storage space, that might slow down your phone. It's like slowing down your life. And I find that when I'm working in my laptop, it's actually an awesome way to start practicing that skill of categorizing, to have folders for things so that you, the next time you go and before you dump all the pictures from a memory chip onto a computer and just have a zillion untitled files, actually going in and thinking not to come up with a different category for every item, but just chunk it out, and to start to put things into files that way. It'll work in the real world too. You'll start to kind of see things as files and sub-files. And, it goes with the fear that you won't be able to find things. Get used to using a new system. And eventually, hopefully, you'll tailor it so that it works better for you and you can find the things you need. So if you need to go back and check something, you can actually find it and you don't have 3 copies because you're not sure where you put it. So it's a great place to start. And for those of us who like to, would rather be acquiring collectibles, or you see a beautiful photo, to take, it's okay to take it. It really is. Just make sure that you don't have more than the virtual space that's available for it. So just kind of think of it as the virtual isn't so unreal. It all goes together.
Thank you, Lee. I was actually thinking about my own experience with all of this. I feel like I need to do the opposite. I can't stand to have a messy inbox. So I literally have a zillion color-coded folders and I organize everything as it comes in. Like if I have 10 or more emails, it drives me I get so uncomfortable about it. So then it's like I'm just listening to this and starting to question the own things that I do. And I'll be calling Randy and Robin later, and I have some more questions. We have time for one more question. We'll give it to Ellen Daniels at 2:22 p.m. It's the third from the last comment, Jess. Could dealing with decluttering be affected by depression, ADHD, etc.? Randy, your thoughts?
Absolutely, yes. For both of those, they do interfere with the ability to manage the hoarding problem. Depression affects one's motivation to engage in treatment and motivation to do something that's difficult. ADHD certainly is related to the ability to organize things. And also with ADHD, it's hard for people to keep their attention focused on track on things that are emotionally difficult. And this is very emotionally difficult, letting go of things. So what happens frequently is people with ADHD will sit down to try to work on their possessions. They'll pick something up, try to make a decision about it, but it's so uncomfortable that they put it down and look for something that's less uncomfortable. And that process goes on and on. So what we see, we've labeled it churning, because it looks like the person's picking up, putting down, and just churning a pile of things rather than really processing the things in there. Because, and we think the reason is because they are so uncomfortable in dealing with it that they just can't keep their attention focused on it.
And any follow-up before we? Okay, we can go ahead and thank you. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, sometimes it's kind of hard, like chicken and egg kind of thing of like, is somebody have a separate condition of depression versus hoarding disorder? Is the hoarding disorder causing symptoms of depression? Hoarding disorder, the symptoms classically call for difficulty focusing, difficulty concentrating, attending to detail. And so you kind of just wonder, where do the diagnoses fall? Is it part of the struggle with your stuff and being able to stay focused and make decisions and take action? Or is it a true ADD or ADHD diagnosis? And sometimes that can be really confusing. And when people reach out to me, I basically tell them, I think we'll have a better understanding of what's what once we start this process, whether it be letting go, decluttering, however you want to view it.
Yeah, and I would just say, I just wanted to comment on the what Linda Fay just said about clutter also being a result of chronic disorganization. That's essentially just having things out of order, and it's not an emotional attachment. It's just not knowing how to get organized. So we never want to assume that something is hoarding disorder because it looks like it. Don't want to assume that something is OCD because it looks like it. Don't want to even assume that something is depression because it feels like it. Sometimes what we do to get through it actually helps us feel better in the end. So I got to say, I used to avoid working on my organizing because it was upsetting and overwhelming, depressing, but that I actually feel better when I make progress. And it's exciting for me. I want people to know that at a certain point, it's like you get to a place where you're excited for the process because the end is in sight. And I actually feel exhilarated. It started with feeling exhilarated because I left a treasure behind and didn't bring it home. That was the new high. And now it's about seeing a new area opened up and being able to do an activity there. So it's a values-based approach, and it all goes together, and it all makes me feel better in the end. When I'm feeling better, I'm doing better. And when I'm doing better, we're all doing better. So, these things aren't black and white. They're not necessarily more science than art. I think it's a very individual, emotional thing, and we're all trying to figure it out for ourselves so we can help each other.
I think you're spot on. I mean, results are a powerful motivator, and I know it's the same with, when you're doing ERP for OCD. Yeah, the ERP is tough and painful, but when you're seeing results, when the OCD is less and the voices are getting quieter, I look forward to doing ERP and engaging in treatment because I know in the long run I'm going to be better off for it. We have 1 minute left. We did get to everybody's questions. I just want to go around real quick and give everybody an opportunity for last thoughts. Randy, we can start with you.
Well, I appreciate the time and I appreciate your putting this together, Ethan. I think for those of you, we really touched on a lot of things here, but there's so much more to talk about with respect to this problem. And I encourage everyone to look into the International OCD Foundation. We'll have a conference this summer in one form or another, and a conference every year. We have a great hoarding conference that's a part of the IOCDF, and I encourage you all to get involved and learn more about this.
Thank you, Randy. And we're posting links to the hoarding.iocdf.org website, so feel free to check them out. Liam, Beck, final thoughts?
I just wanted to mention that for all family members of people who are living with a finding-keeping tendency, I want you to know that there's two questions that come up. And oftentimes when we seek help for ourselves, people say, oh, well, to help your person in your life who has hoarding tendencies, this is what you got to do. And the person themselves gets kind of left aside. And I want you to know, if you're a family member who's struggling with this in any form, it's okay to seek help that's directed at you. You don't always have to bear the burden of feeling that the onus is on you to make your family member better or to help with that situation. There needs to be kind of a separation there, and it's okay to get help that's just for you and how you can feel better in the situation.
Thank you, Lee. So thank you, Beck. Go ahead, Lee.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. Thanks for this opportunity to share some of these insights from different perspectives. I know that some folks were reluctant even to tune in today because they didn't hear their own side of the story addressed enough, that they felt like they were just supposed to be part of the help when they were actually feeling like they were not getting help at all. And to be able to say, you know, help yourself and get help for yourself is really important. I'm glad that we could address that. Also, just to be able to reflect myself on what this experience has been like. We're a couple months into it now. And I've seen big changes in the way I think about my things and myself. And, you know, I'm making notes so that I can learn as I go. A lot of the links that you're talking about are also on our website, mutual-support.com. We've got a lot of free resources and links to other educational articles, videos, and things that you can check out. We're also ramping up to offer these supports like Buried in Treasures virtually. So if you are interested in joining an online support group, there are some out there. If you'd like to join one with us, please be in touch through our website. We'd love to talk to you about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lee. Robin.
Yeah, you know, we could, we could talk all day long about this topic. And I'm so grateful for all my colleagues out there who are doing everything they can to help people and to do the research, Randy and everything. And I think just touching on the family members, it's important to remember that, you know, it's not just the individual struggling with the hoarding behaviors. It's a system that people are living in, and that everybody really needs attention to heal and to look at the impact that it's having on their lives. And to remember that there are resources for everyone equally around. And if you go to the IOCDF website, they do have a provider database. And of course, there's lots of free information and fact sheets and things like that. But if you are looking to start seeing somebody, they've got, you know, just thousands of people on the website, and hopefully somebody in your area. And I really want to send a shout out to all these people who have followed us today. Send in your questions because this is really what makes it just such fruitful conversation.
Thank you, Robin. I'll just tag on to what Robin says right now. Even if they're not in your area, but in your state, now everybody is virtual. So you have an opportunity, if you live in a rural community or an area where there isn't a specialist, you have an opportunity to really tap into an entire resource that maybe wasn't available before because everybody is practicing virtually. So I would definitely encourage everyone, if you need help, if you need treatment, if you need therapy, to look at the resource directory, look for clinicians in your area or in your state, and reach out. I know a lot of people are nervous about teletherapy, or is it a good time to start, or can I make a connection with my therapist? And the answer is yes, yes, yes. Do all of the above. It's never too early to go ahead and start and getting a handle on this. So thank you, Randy. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Becca. Thank you, Robin, for joining me or letting me join you. Let me be a small part of your community. For a short time. I always learn a ton, and I look forward to continuing our town halls and conversations. Just I'll whip through some quick wrap-ups. Tomorrow at 7 p.m., we have a regular acoustic unplugged version of Just Ethan with Just Ethan. If you're enjoying seeing me all the time, every day, please tune in. If you're tired of seeing me every day, you should tune in. It's a good exposure. Wednesday at 7 p.m., we'll be having a Coping with Intrusive Thoughts Volume 3. We have John Hirschfield, we have Kimberly Quinlan, and we have Neil Hemmer, so you won't want to miss that. And then finally, next Saturday, we'll be doing another town hall, and this is going to be with parents whose children have OCD. So if you're a parent, a child with OCD, we want to give you all the support and love that we can. As always, thanks to Jess doing behind the scenes. If you haven't already, subscribe to the IOCDF. Subscribe and follow on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter, so you'll get notified for these upcoming panels. Last but not least, if you have any questions, any comments, if we didn't answer your question, you can always email the foundation at iocdf.org. You can also email me at justethan@iocdf.org. They will be in the chat box. If you have questions for Randy, Robin, Lee, or Becca, feel free to email me if you're not comfortable. Lee and you can go to mutual-support to email Lee and Beck. But if you want to reach out to anybody, please feel free to email me, and I'll make sure everybody gets your email. Thank you for joining us this Monday afternoon. Stay safe, stay vigilant, feel the feels. Don't let OCD or hoarding disorder off the hook. Now's the time to attack it. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.